Good. I think for everyone there, it's good morning. Here, it's good evening. My name is Kristen Durham. I'm the VP of Startup Initiatives at Zendesk. Zendesk is a customer support and engagement software platform. We're headquartered in San Francisco, thus the late time for me here, but we have 150,000 customers around the world, offices around the world, including our Asian headquarters in Singapore, which I think is also home to E27. I've been leading our startup programs here at Zendesk for about the last year. Before that, I served for 4 years as Chief of Staff at Zendesk to our CEO and have been in and around startups for probably the last 10 years of my career in the US and Latin America. And in Asia. And so I'm super glad to be here today with you all with E27 and kicking off this partnership together. And of course, very pleased to be here today with Nick, from one of our great partners there in the region.
Yeah, thanks for having me, E27 and Kristen as well. So I'm Nick Dope. I'm the customer strategist at Bukalapak. For those of you who don't know Bukalapak, it's basically an Indonesian-based technology company. We focus on helping to create a fair economy for all. It was founded in 2010, so it's about 10 years old, and started as an online marketplace. So Buka means open in Indonesian, and Lapak means stall. So it's basically open your stall. So an online marketplace. Over time, we've added a lot of different services to the platform as well. So for example, you can pay electricity bills, you can invest in stocks, you can pay your taxes, buy phone credit, all kinds of things that make your life easier. In terms of size, we serve around 90 million users. So that would be also 6 million merchants, so sellers on our platform, and 5 million mitra, which are basically offline mom and pop stores that either sell, buy FMCG goods from us, or they sell virtual products to their offline customers through the platform. And as a customer strategist, I'm basically trying to figure out what are the most important things we can do for our users and try to make that happen. I'm very happy here today to join you guys. It's an honor for me to have a chat about customer experience. Looking forward to it, and also to your questions from Kristen's side or from the community. Yeah, excited.
Thank you, Nick and Kristen. Thank you for introducing yourselves and being here today. Before we just get on with this exciting interactive workshop with Kristen, I will just remind you all about the little house rules. This is an interactive meeting, so feel free to keep your videos on. If you do wish to ask a question or make a comment, make sure to raise your hand. We will give you the permission to unmute. Make sure to unmute yourself before you start speaking. And also feel free to use the chat to engage with all the other members, all the other attendees, and also our speakers. Without further ado, I am going to pass the floor to Kristen so that she can take over, and then we can get into it. Thank you.
There we go. I'm off mute. And can everyone see my screen? I hope. Maybe a thumbs up from Nick and okay. All right. Fantastic. Let's get rolling. So yeah, hello and welcome again. You guys got my personal intro already. And just one more time, thanks to you for joining, and thanks for Nick in particular being here, joining us from Bukalapak. I have a few things prepared for the group today, and just to give you an overview of what to expect, I'll be presenting the customer experience benchmarks for fast-growing startups that we here at Zendesk identified in our research earlier this year. I'm going to talk about a little bit about what's changed in our relationships with customers since the rise of COVID-19, and touch on the data that's important for driving your company's growth. And to really keep me honest and to share a view from the front lines, I'll bring in Nick at the end to dive into these topics with me and leave time for your questions as well. And so let's dive in. Starting with this surprising statistic, our research uncovered that more than 70% of startup founders and decision makers actually do not have a formal customer support strategy in place. Many companies, and by virtue of that, many companies are missing out on the opportunity to deliver on the customer experiences that will set them apart from their peers and foster long-term business success. Just last week, we were doing an event with Archana Agrawal. She's the CMO at Airtable, which is a pretty well-known US-based startup. She said, "I believe customer experience today is a true differentiator, that there is a proliferation of overlapping software, which makes differentiating here and customer experience even more critical." Of course, you know, I'm one to easily agree, but I do think it's the case, right? Like in areas where we can produce the same products, where we can reach the same markets, that customer experience can really be something that defines and sets your startup apart early on. And so if you are part of the 70%, although our poll seems to suggest we have a lot of folks already with a strategy in place, if you are in the 70%, there's still time to address this. And so as we go into the research more, I'll talk about just a primer. I'll talk about fast growing startups versus others. Fast growing startups in our work means startups must have doubled their customer support agent count in the first 2 years of using Zendesk. This is a proxy for employee growth. And they must have had 18 months or less between publicly disclosed fundraising rounds. So it says that investors are kind of behind this too. One more note before we dive in, you know, these benchmarks are really focused on how you run your customer support organization. And there's a lot of really important data around how you do operate that organization and structure your customer experience. So we're going to talk about data in that way in the benchmarks. And then as we bring Nick in later, we'll talk about it at a little bit more zoomed out level in terms of how it influences growth and touches your business more holistically. So our research illustrates there's no one-size-fits-all approach to customer service and really no magic recipe for success. However, if there was one overarching trend, it's that fast-growing startups generally move faster and invest more than their peers. And whether you're early in your sport journey or well on your way, here we have some of the key performance benchmarks for startups who have experienced fast growth to help you assess your own performance and rethink your support goals going forward. And so if you take a look at our report, we outline 4 key takeaways. The first is that, you know, customer service is tied to growth. Startups that see faster growth rates start thinking about customer service earlier, and they embrace more tools and processes than the rest. Our data shows that 1 out of 3 fast-growing startups actually added support within 2 years of founding the business. Another key component is that fast-growing startups use omnichannel to cut wait times. When we talk about omnichannel in terms of customer experience and customer support, what we just mean is multiple communication channels that are integrated and allow customers to reach you in a variety of ways. So omnichannel would include email, it includes chat, talk, you know, social messaging. Your ability to provide support in all of these channels can cut wait times. In fact, we saw a 2 times faster resolution for 2 times faster resolution for fast-growing startups by the end of their 2nd year in addressing customer inquiries and complaints. Unicorns, uniquely, and high-growth companies broadly embrace self-service. And those that have really stood out, they prioritize self-service features like online help centers from early on. They're 61% faster to adopt self-service, and they really see the benefits from allowing customers to serve themselves. And finally, startups should actually rethink their priorities when evaluating customer service and engagement tools. So though fast-growing startups are more likely to use and employ an omni-channel strategy and lean on things like self-service, startup leaders we surveyed actually said these features are less influential in the buying decision when evaluating customer service tools. So these are kind of, you know, 4 high-level takeaways. What I want to do now is double-click a little bit and get into the data more deeply. So let's look at this critical question of timing. We saw that investing in customer service correlates to growth. One of the really interesting things that we saw here is that timing is important when it comes to providing support. In fact, fast-growing startups that are Zendesk customers were 33% more likely than other startups to implement support within a year of first raising capital. This is important. You raise outside capital, the expectation that you're not just acquiring users, but also growing them and retaining them, that impetus starts increasing. And so, when should you think about adding support, formalizing your support organization? According to our benchmark, you want to do so within 9 to 10 months of that first round of fundraising. This is a critical time to prove that you not only have product market fit, but you have an organization that's going to support stickiness with the customers over a longer period of time. You'll also want to consider early adoption of tools that prioritize speed and convenience for your customers and internal teams. So compared to peers, fast-growing startups, as you see in the middle, were 33% more likely to add omnichannel in their first 2 years. On top of that, they were 20% more likely to add live channels like chat during the same period, which again helps you solve customer requests faster than sort of old or traditional asynchronous options like email. And so taken together as a result, responding faster to customers more efficiently than the rest of their peers, this is really one of the things that helps fast-growing startups stand out from the rest. So like I said, timing matters. It pays to start early. And as startups put more time and effort into your support operations, those investments can and do pay off. Increased productivity in particular means less time, keeping customers waiting, and a better experience for customers and agents overall. Now, it doesn't start this way. Let me be honest. At 6 months into starting to build out a real customer support function, everyone is struggling. Fast-growing startups, regular startups alike. Wait times are long, regardless of that. And actually for fast-growing startups at 6 months, actually they're behind. It takes those teams an hour longer to first reply to customer requests than their slower growth peers. But by 2 years, that narrative has changed entirely. Fast-growing startups, they do things that allow them to resolve tickets faster, respond to customer questions about half the time actually of their slower growth peers. And this really comes down to investment trade-offs between building infrastructure for the future and just tackling what's most immediately in front of you. And so the results are out there, right? We see productivity improvements. They take time and investment, but they're well worth the effort. And a good target to think about this is that for agent efficiency, by the end of year 1, your agents could be handling as many as 100 tickets per agent per month. When you start early, you can lower wait times. If you're an early stage startup, you should be working towards keeping your reply times to around 3 hours for non-live channels like email, and have your tickets resolved within 1 business day by your 2nd year of adopting a support platform. So these benchmarks are helpful to give you something to anchor on. And this really only becomes possible if you're making it easy for agents, for your employees and customers to get the information they need, using workflows and automation, using self-service, using all these tools that are available to you. And finally, if you get started early, you can have a better customer experience overall. And, when it comes to measuring that experience, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, customer satisfaction, or CSAT, is a great metric to look at. Let me just say it should be high, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And this is a delicate balance that many companies, large and small, have to navigate when they determine what is the right level of support for them to be supplying. So one more double click on self-service, because according to our data, it's an important contributor to being able to scale as well. So as you can see in these charts, on the left-hand side, we're showing companies with 1 to 99 employees. On the right-hand side, we're showing companies that are 100 to 1,000 employees. And regardless of what stage you're at, fast-growing startups definitely invest in their self-service earlier and faster to deliver that better experience for a customer. If you're new to support, you should focus on launching this early. And when I say early, by about 6 months in, when you get started, you should have at least, when you get started, you should have at least articles. And the honest truth is that your top 5 articles generally are going to get about 40% of all views. So really take the time to create that nice, small, curated bit of content to get you going, and then add about 3 new articles each month to ensure the quality of your self-service continues to improve over time. And as your product set and as your offering grows, you're keeping pace with that as well. And finally, because everyone always wants to know what about the unicorns, you know, we all want to become the next big thing. There are some really interesting highlights that companies using Zendesk that have gone on to become unicorns. There are some interesting highlights of what they do differently. And for one, they adopt omni-channel live channels quicker than anyone else, even quicker than fast growth startups. Some of this is by necessity, others by virtue. Also in their first 2 years, they're 37% more likely to offer omni-channel customer support, 38% more likely to have chat, 48% more likely to have talk. So if you find yourself really booming in this high growth, it's important to push yourselves to see if you can get to live channels sooner. And also, you know, they were quicker to build out online help centers to answer common customer questions before they reach, as you can see here. So with that, you know, there's a very quick walkthrough of some of the key findings. There's a lot more data where that came from. If you want to learn more, please check out the full report at the website provided here. As I promised earlier, though, I want to take a couple of minutes to speak to the current market we're in and zoom out just a little bit. And really, there are 4 anchors that I've been talking a lot with startups about really over the past 6 months. And those 4 things, you know, when we think about what really matters now, the first is really scale. You know, you must scale if you want to manage contact growth. Right now, we're seeing that year over year, customer inquiries are growing by 16%. And, you know, I can probably guarantee you that budgets for customer support are not growing at that same pace. And so if you're really trying to think about how can I grow during this time, or how can I at least keep up with the volume of increased inquiries from my customers, you really got to get after this early on. And it's not a problem that you can just throw more people at. Another thing that matters a lot right now is convenience in reaching you. What we've seen is that since February, March, WhatsApp has grown 111% as a channel used by customers reaching out to companies. You know, we've all seen that social messaging and direct messaging services are things that we use more and more. I mean, particularly in APAC, I think that you know, it's so natural for us to be you know, messaging services like WhatsApp and WeChat and Line, and getting, you know, not just talking with our friends and family, but actually doing business over those channels as well. And so with the rise of COVID-19, we've seen a demand for convenience rise among consumers and among businesses. And that impact then comes down to the business and the way that you think about preparing yourself to support customers. I think something else right now that as you're thinking about a support organization, maybe isn't intuitive, but you know, right now selling is hard. Selling is always hard. Right now selling is particularly hard. And actually customer engagement via support is an opportunity to drive growth. You know, in the middle of the summer, sales email responses were down something like 25% mid-year. And that's hard to overcome, but guaranteed, you know, your customers are still reaching out to you, right? And so even if the initial outreach is related to some sort of challenge or need that they have related to your product, you know, it's still a conversation. It's still a jumping off point for you to be able to understand what is going on with your customer. How can you better serve them? And maybe even how can you sell them more products and services? And finally, you know, one of the things to be, you know, constantly reminded of, maniacal about, you know, $1 today is more valuable or more expensive than $1 was back in Q1 of 2020. And by that, I mean, you know, it's a tougher market to raise money. And especially if you're burning capital that you raise from investors, you know, from angels, friends and family, whoever it is, you know, those with valuations coming down, those dollars are now more expensive. And so it's really critical to think about spend in an even more dare I say, conservative way, but you need to be really cautious about where you're spending your dollars, and making sure that those dollars go towards things that are going to drive your customer growth and drive the experience overall. And so just finally, when, again, like, you know, we're here to talk about connecting data and how does it relate to customer experience. You know, this is a really basic framework that I like to use for, you know, balancing the detail and the weeds that you really need to be paying attention to manage your business day in and day out, but also the major goals that the business has to accomplish. And so, you know, when we think about data, it needs to be looked at all different levels. You know, everything from a top business goal and matching that to a North Star metric, the thing that you have to obsess over, the thing that really, you know, shows overall, are we winning or are we losing with our business? You know, a level down, you look at trending at the account level, customer health scores and things of that nature help you get a sense of how is the business operating more generally. And then clicking down even further, you know, the quality of interaction with your company and your product, looking at things like Net Promoter Score, CSAT, the data that correlates, the data that connects these areas of focus with, you know, mapping them to something that's actually measurable in your business. Like, this is where the goodness lies, in being able to understand what your customers are asking for and put your investments there and to grow the business during this time. And I'm going to bring in my guest now, but I'd be remiss if I didn't first remind you all that our Zendesk for Startups program is live and available to you. Get started for 6 months, leverage our resources, content, like some of what I've shared today, to make sure you get started right. But with that, I'm really excited to bring in Nick, and to join me in doing a deeper dive into Bukalapak's customer support and engagement operations. Awesome. And are you here with me, Nick?
I'm here.
All right.
Thanks for having me, Kristen. Look forward to our conversation.
So in full transparency, I created 4 questions for Nick ahead of time of the probably 40 that I wanted to ask you. I'm gonna give folks a peek at those questions really quickly, but then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop sharing and give folks an opportunity to see you and to kind of hear from you more directly. And so what I want to do is I really want to help us kind of transition from this idea that, you know, data is everywhere, lots of things matter, but which questions really matter right now? So we'll get into some of the trends, we'll get into, you know, approach to growth and retention, things like that. And so let me stop sharing and we'll dig into it. So I do want to start off, Nick, and ask you kind of, I shared a lot of data, right? Maybe you can kind of give us the Bukalapak feel for, like, what are those trends that you're seeing in customer engagement? How do customers reach you? What do they reach you about? Give us a sense for what that engagement looks like.
Sure, Kristen. So I think to give a little bit of context about Bukalapak's customer service organization, we do really strongly believe in multi-channel, or omni-channel. I think we offer maybe 10 channels, but I think the main channel for us is live chat, and then we also have social media, email, and call center, which are the other big ones. But also we noticed that I think live chat became the biggest channel in the past few years quite quickly. I think what we see, depending on your question or your problem as a user, you might have a preference for a certain channel, right? Especially if something is very urgent, or it might involve money, or it's a very sensitive topic. People tend to pick up the phone, for example, or live chat. But if something is not so urgent or it's not so sensitive, they might just be okay with an asynchronous email, for example. Maybe an interesting example as well is, in the beginning of COVID, so we're an online platform, right? So we have buyers and sellers. We saw that one of the contact reasons why somebody really wants to contact Bukalapak in the first, let's say the first month of, let's say the local lockdown here, is to cancel their order, either from the buyer side or the seller side. And this usually had to do with, you know, the order processing times would take much longer on the seller side, and the buyer could no longer wait. Or on the seller side, it's like, yeah, I don't have any inventory to sell because my supplier is closed or something like that. So we did see some trend towards certain types of questions or problems. And we actually saw that, you know, many people like to interact with us through a live channel, especially live chat. I think that is a little bit about, you know, what we see at the moment. We see that email is slowly declining over time as a channel. Like you mentioned, like WhatsApp is coming up. It's very, it's something that people feel very natural, as they're already chatting with their friends and their family in WhatsApp anyway. So just why not also allow them to contact us through WhatsApp, which would something we now also allow for our mom and pop stores, for example, who are very, very used to that way of communicating. So therefore, I think it's very important to have, to be able to let your customers choose their preferred channel, given their problem, but also just their personal preference of how to communicate.
Awesome. And I think it's really interesting, you know, in operating a marketplace, you guys are B2C, you're B2B, and you're B2, you know, the mom and pops as well, right? When you think about these customers and the different profiles or personas that you have, maybe I should back up and ask, like, how do you actually deal with all of that within the company? Because I would assume that these folks, the behavior is pretty different when they reach out to you and want support.
Yeah, so we do have, like you mentioned, very various types of users. I think, especially Indonesia is a big country, right? We have, I think, 280 million people or something like that. So a lot. Luckily, a lot of them are on our platform as well. So apparently, we do something well. But I think there's many people that are, you know, underserved when it comes to technology. And what we notice is that, yeah, we have to educate them in how it works as well. It's not only you just offer your service and they just immediately understand how it works. They might only be familiar with certain applications on their phone. They might even have not such a good internet connection, which can cause all kinds of other things we should be able to help them with. So I think that is very interesting. And what we try to do is, each of these types of users are very important to us. So those are the buyers, but also the sellers and the mom and pop stores, let's say. We also have to serve them in different ways. For example, the mom and pop stores, like I mentioned, they are, you know, they are offline stores. So those are typically like a very small store on the corner of the street. And what we allow them to do is like, hey, you sell your, maybe your shampoo, or maybe your deodorant, or maybe your cigarettes. What we allow them to do is like, hey, here is something else that you can offer to your customers that at the moment, they really have to, you know, take a car and drive for a few minutes to actually be able to top up their phone credits, for example, or to pay their electricity bill. So we allow those small stores to now offer that service to their customers. But also that brings in some challenges in terms of internet connection. And if you top up your phone credit, you know, you expect that within 10 seconds, you can see it in your app that you actually received that, right? So if that takes a little bit longer, then we immediately see the spikes in customer contacts and complaints from these mom and pop stores. Say, hey, I want to sell this to my user, but it doesn't arrive fast enough. So yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic on having these all kinds of users, and especially the offline, because yeah, that remains a little bit it's difficult for me since I'm, I'm already active on the internet for quite a while. So I try to be as empathetic as possible to understand what are these challenges that these customers or user of our platform have, and really try to make better products for them and offer better customer service as well.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. The way that you've been able to help some of your customers, think about growth and retention during this time. What's been your approach? What's been Bukalapak's approach to still trying to drive growth and customer retention over the past 6 months? Has it changed at all? Are you still following kind of core basic principles? Share a little bit more about that with us.
Sure. That's a very interesting question. So I think in general, Bukalapak is a company that has, being customer obsessed or customer oriented, very much ingrained from the beginning. So the founders really, instilled that type of thinking in the way we work. Not in all corners of the organization that's as prevalent or as to the level that we, well, personally me, would like to see it. But I think in general, we're all working for our users. And I think last week or something, I read this quote somewhere. I don't know who it is from, but it's like marketing is like proposing to a girl. Branding is why she would say yes, and customer experience is the reason why she will stay. And I really believe that therefore customer experience and improving the way your products and services work is such a key to sustainable growth. I do also believe in marketing and branding, but I see that as, I'm very biased, of course, but I do believe that you first need to make sure that whatever you're offering as a product or a service is an awesome experience. Because if you do that, any money that you spend on marketing or on branding will have such a higher effect than when you have a service that sort of leaks the people out on the other side because they're not becoming a fan or don't really like the experience. So I always believe, like, if you never lose a customer, you will get busy very fast, right? You will be a very busy person. So I think in terms of Bukalapak's, especially in the past months, even more important to focus and look at, okay, what are the core main products that we offer, and what are the things that we should improve on those. So less on, what kind of other cool products should we offer, but more back to the core is like, hey, these very important things that we already do, apparently people like it because we have many users. What are the things that would make those experiences even more awesome for them, so that we're, this retention basically is one of the reasons why we're able to grow, let's say.
Yeah, I think for our business, right, at Zendesk, that's been the same too. And I would imagine for a lot of at least subscription companies where it's not that first purchase, right, that matters. I mean, that matters a lot, but it's the recurring relationship, the recurring revenue that you get over time, your opportunity to, as you develop more products and services, to sell those into the same user base. We can oftentimes kind of get distracted by acquisition, but really, oftentimes your existing customer base is going to be the one that drives a lot of growth for the business. I think as long as you're listening to them and trying to understand what it is that they're telling you, and I'll use that as a transition to ask, there's, you mentioned when we were chatting last week, customers writing in like, this feedback it's gold and it's for free, but what do you do with it, right? For a business the size of Bukalapak's, you get so many inquiries, and how is it that while you're trying to solve the problems that are coming to you from your customers, how do you take some of that data and actually share it with the rest of the organization to inform the way that you develop product or operationalize your go-to-market, let's say?
Yeah, great question, Kristen. So I think this is typically what I've seen that many companies struggle with. Also, us, we're still learning on. Okay, we have a lot of data. We have a lot of feedback from customers, like those free pieces of advice that they give you to, what are the things that we should basically do to improve their experience. What we tried to do, and especially in the past year, because like you mentioned, we have a lot of different types of users and also different types of questions. And we have big volumes of those because we have so many users. So it's not really doable for somebody that works in product or in business to go over all these questions or complaints one by one. So what we've been doing, I've worked very closely with the customer satisfaction department, so our customer service department, to look at, okay, across all these channels that we have, can we make the way or the reason that the way we log the reason why somebody contacts us, can we make that uniform across all channels? And can we come up with, let's say, a standardized list of, let's say, these are the 200 contact reasons. So these are the reasons why somebody contacts us, so that we're able to quantify this qualitative input from the user side. And that's what we have been working on, and we're currently actually using, well, almost since I think a year, where we were able to have it across all channels and then add everything up and see, okay, what are apparently the biggest struggles for users, and what are the things that we could do with that. So we asked all the CS heroes, so those are our customer service agents. We asked them, okay, identify the reason why somebody contacts us, log that, and also add a few structured other pieces of information about that contact that you have with the user. We call them attributes. That would be, for example, what was the payment method that they use? What is the delivery partner that was shipping this product? What would be the product? Like, is it about the gold investing product or the stock investing, or about paying your bills, your electricity bill product? So that with that information in a structured way, we're basically able to loop it back into the organization. And we, so to especially product managers and the development squads, but also to the business, and by saying, hey, you are, let's say, responsible for payments. And these are all the inquiries and complaints that we get that have to do something with payments. And also, without just leave it at that, we also give them more information. We try to enrich that information as much as possible with, okay, what was the payment method? Was it within 15 minutes after the transaction, or was it on average after 2 hours after the transaction? So we try to enrich that as much as possible. So, because we also know that the people in the business and product side, they have a lot of things on their hand. So we need to make it as easy as possible for them to include customer feedback as part of their decision making. So we really believe in, on one side, you have business metrics. You want to grow, you want to make more money, you want to make more turnover. On the other side, we have the users, and it in my experience, and I think in most companies, the business metrics scream louder and usually get priority. In order to be able to have a good discussion and better decision making, therefore we need to make this customer side, this customer feedback, we need to bring it as easy as possible to them, give them some monitoring, give them some tools to easily analyze that, so they create at least this friction between the two. Not saying that the customer side improvements should always win, or the business side, but at least you get better decision making. I believe that if you only think about business and growth, you're making suboptimal choices in terms of priorities, and also for resource allocation. especially on the long run. So yeah, when it comes to all this data, we try to make it as easy as possible for the business to consume this and make it part of their decision making.
Awesome. I'm just doing a time check. I think we're getting in some questions, and we owe it to the audience to kick it over to that. I have a few, let's say, rapid fire questions that I want to get to you, Nick, before I hand it over to Millie and the rest of the audience. So, quick advice for the founders and startups joining us today. What's one really important thing to consider when collecting and structuring your data? The thing that maybe a startup would overlook early on?
Yeah, that's a good one. So one thing only, yeah. So if I can give two things. So one is, very quickly, so make it part of your culture from the beginning, from the early on, to that it's everybody's responsibility to make customers happy. By let's say, holding everybody accountable for, these metrics that you measure. That can be customer satisfaction, can be net promoter score, or very simple one, which is quite effective, is reduce customer contacts by automating, by fixing your product, by making better experience. I think that is, that's one. And the other thing is also not really on how to structure your data, but it's more about, I think as a founder, or as one of the early employees, I think you can really lead by example. So be super hungry for customer feedback the moment that you launched just your new product or your service. Look for feedback, pick up the phone, call some customers, or chat with a few of them, to basically ingrain that way of thinking and that hunger for customer feedback early on, so that everybody will see, okay, that's apparently what we're supposed to do. And then, because the whole company is, like, customer service is not a department, right? It's the whole company. Everybody serves the customer. That's why you exist in the first place. So I think that would be my takeaways.
Great. And any like critical early investments that companies often overlook? What would you say, like, as you're weighing where to invest dollars? What's something that's going to pay dividends from your experience?
I think it's something that you also mentioned. Invest early on in creating a simple, like, knowledge base with what are the common questions that we get that are not preventable, or maybe preventable, but at least we have solid answers to them, to allow users to self-serve them and get the answers by themselves. Some users prefer still to contact you. That's okay, but at least you will prevent a lot of unnecessary contacts, and a lot of users will just have a better experience. So that would be like a knowledge base, very simple FAQs on your website, which can also, of course, be just a tool for your customer service to answer some questions, right? So investing in understanding what kind of question will come, and just create explicit on the website or in your app materials to answer the most frequent problems or the inquiries that you get.
Awesome. I had a woman at a startup, a medical health startup here called Simple Practice, say that investing in a good help center, like, it's the most empathetic act that you can take as a company, because this is you trying to understand, like, what is it that a customer wants before they come to you. And so I always love that, like, something that is as simple as frequently asked questions can be, such a big signal for what a company thinks about their customers and how they prioritize their time and experience. With that, as I promised, I'll bring Millie back in and let her take over the questioning. But thanks again, Nick, for joining us. I could have this conversation with you for hours, so I appreciate you sharing a bit with us.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for inviting me, Kristen and E27.
Thanks, Kristen and Nick. Thanks for this really interesting chat, and I think we could keep going on listening to you. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep, just put in a couple of questions. And I loved, Kristen, the anecdote that you just shared around, the empathy, how help centers can be the very empathetic act. And I think even with the pandemic, we've kind of seen how B2C and mostly B2C companies needing to be a lot more empathetic. So my question is sort of in that range of how can customer experience become more empathetic? What are some of these? Of course, we have the tools, and as you guys mentioned that, you use a lot of these various ways to engage the customers, but how can you imbibe that culture of empathy with your customer service executives, or even any of the tools that you're using? I mean, I guess it's open to both Kristen, you and Nick, and whoever wants to take a crack at it.
You want to go first, Kristen?
I'm happy to give the piece of advice that we actually employ at Zendesk, which is like, everybody needs to answer some customer inquiries. So for a long time, for part of our onboarding, and actually, companies like Slack, a lot of people across, San Francisco and beyond, like, that trial by fire, really throwing you out in front of customers and seeing, like, can you answer their questions? Can you help them? It's a great way to understand how they're coming to you and your brand, the way that they're understanding your product and their expectations of how you're going to serve them. And there's nothing more humbling than kind of being in the hot seat, trying to resolve these things. Because I think generally, we all want to be helpful, but it's hard to actually do that. And so through this process, we see like, oh, here are some of the gaps in our knowledge, or here's some of the things that just, we can work on from the product team, or we can make clear in our selling and our selling process. So like, one thing every company can start doing is ensuring that everyone takes on some customer ticket duty. It's a great way for you to know what both your customer support team is dealing with, but more importantly, what your customers are facing.
Yeah, I think that I love that example. That is so humbling. Like we used to have that also as part of the the onboarding process. Just sit next to an agent, or even be the agent and interact with this user. But you also learn what language do they speak, because sometimes you expect this is like very formal language, but actually it's more like text language. It's like very informal. And maybe if I can add one thing, it would be to be your own heavy, super critical user. So really, if you're providing B2C service, that might be a little bit easier than B2B. But definitely just experience your own experience as often as possible, because that will also allow you to see very small things like, hey, this text is actually a little bit confusing, or that email that I got is not really what I expected. So it will help you getting into this, into these shoes of the customer, and come up with some small tweaks. Sometimes it's very quick win to improve the experience for them.
Great. I think both of you sort of be on this side and that side of being a user and the client. I think that's a great tip. And Kristen, especially, like everybody going through, answering some of the queries, and that'll be a great learning experience. And doing is knowing. One last question before we wrap up. And I think you both spoke about the importance of omni-channel outreach and also live. But for an early stage startup, and let's say with much limited resources, if they had to pick one, what would you give them to, would you say emphasize on omni-channel or the live aspect?
That's a good question. So if you would really have to pick, maybe like go where your customers are, right? If the standard in your industry, maybe for example, your B2B, and the standard is just to have quick calls, then offer that as the channel, like phone calls. If the industry standard, your B2C, and the industry standard is like everything happens just in WhatsApp, offer that. You cannot really control through which channels the customer want to approach you, but I do believe that it's very important to at least offer that. You cannot say, yeah, you can only email us. That's not going to work. People don't prefer email. In most of the cases, they don't prefer that anymore. So try to figure out what is it that, how do your customers want to reach you, and try to opt for that.
Yeah, I think I'd just add to that. You know, I think that I would say probably start with omni-channel, right? It helps set maybe a different expectation that you're not going to be responding live every time, which you in fact can do. And that's one of the great things about omni-channel is you can blend like live chat and phone service at sometimes with social messaging support or like have somebody fill out a contact form. So the good news is you can test and see where that is. I agree with Nick completely. Like if you know where your customers are already and where it's going to be most easy for them to contact you, like start there. But sort of don't feel pressure to be live all the time. You know, you could set up in the US, it's a little less common, I know, in Asian markets, but if you have US customers, you know, you can offer a phone, but you can just have it go to voicemail all the time and call them back when you're ready, because that's the other thing. You know, if you're a founder, if the team is small, you're maybe at your computer all the time working at your company, but you cannot be, you know, staffing those channels all the time too. So as much as you can serve what the customer is demanding, like, you know, also set those boundaries to help them understand, like, this is a way that I can contact a company. I can expect a response in a certain amount of time. And generally, you know, most customers are open to that as long as their expectations are matched by the reality that you deliver.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. I think it does go back to your original point of prioritizing. I mean, as a startup, just need to know where your customers are and where best you can serve them. I think with this, we'll kind of wrap up the Q&A session, and it's been a great and engaging chat with you guys. Thank you so much, Kristen and Nick. But I do want to remind all our attendees that we do have a lot of upcoming events that are exclusive for E27 members, both pro and non-pro. So sign up today to receive any of these updates via our newsletter, or even just, you know, be out on our social media channels. You can reach out to us, any of us there. And I'm sure Kristen and Nick would love to connect with you guys on LinkedIn, on their personal LinkedIns, if you have more questions or just want to know a little more about customer experience index or how Bukalapak does it. Feel free to reach them out on their personal LinkedIn channels. You've all been a great audience. Thank you so much for being with us here today. We will carry on forward for the next one-on-one session for the pro members. So I will request Kristen to stay on, but Nick, it was a pleasure having you, and thank you so much for sharing Bukalapak's interesting journey and the millions of customers that you manage. So thank you all, and hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks for the invite as well.